Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Franchpreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. Well, we're meeting with AJ Titus, and AJ is the president of the United Franchise Group, the global leader for entrepreneurs, and Signarama, the world's largest sign and graphics franchise. And when AJ Titus was a little boy, his father taught him to memorize a list of 18 principles for life, and this became known as the list. We're going to talk to AJ about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews, so stick around because we have a great show.
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Franchpreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're meeting with AJ Titus, and AJ is the president of the United Franchise Group, a global leader for entrepreneurs, and Signarama, the world's largest sign and graphics franchise. Hi, AJ. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to have you on the show, AJ. We always like to ask our guests, where are you calling from today?
I am in very hot West Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, that's okay. It's hot up here in Easton, Pennsylvania. I think it's probably almost just as hot, AJ. So I get it.
Sure.
So it's great to have you on the show. You know, most people in franchising, AJ, I mean, they know your name, they know your dad's name, but, you know, your story is, well, it's a little bit different from the 700 other interviews we've done over the years. Maybe, you know, for our new listeners, you can talk about how you got involved in franchising, AJ.
Well, it's a complicated question, but an easy answer in the sense of, you know, I was born and raised in franchising. My grandfather founded Minuteman Press. My cousins, my uncles, my brothers, everyone is in franchising. My dad is the founder of Signarama and United Franchise Group, and our dinner table conversations were about franchising. It wasn't about sports and franchising. So I really haven't known anything else, and I love the business model, and I think it helps people build their business and build a legacy themselves. So it's always been in my blood.
So what else do you like about franchising, AJ? Because, when I read about your background, I sense, you could have done really, anything with your life, but still, you went back to franchising. What do you love most about franchising?
I love the parts where a franchise owner will give me a call and say, AJ, thank you and your team for supporting me and helping me build the business and building a business that is going to help fund my kids go through college and help my savings and help me retire. And, that's why you live for franchising, because you're a piece of someone else's success. We're not selling, luxury items. We're selling and supporting someone on the system and helping them be successful.
Yeah, you're part of that experience, aren't you, AJ? And your dad was part of that experience, and your grandfather was part of that experience. And you said something in an interview I thought it was brilliant. You said something like kids spell love time. And I thought that was so brilliant. I said, because that kind of applies to franchising as well, doesn't it, AJ? And I kind of sense that that's your one of your philosophies, isn't it?
It is. My dad is the one who taught me that. And I just it's ironic because my wife and I, we just had our first child. She's 2 months old now.
Congratulations, AJ. That's wonderful.
Thank you. It's been awesome. But you can't see me, but I'm tired right now, so it's all good. But no, it's time, and at the end of the day, you're not going to change someone's life in one franchise visit with them. You're not going to one support visit. Right, so it's constant and being persistent and reminding them of the system and communicating as best you can. And it may take years to click. It may take months to click. You just don't know. But you can't lose hope, and you can't lose that fire, and can't lose the system because the system's successful. So it's a big part of what we do.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about, we've had Signarama on the show in the past. We've had some franchisees on the show, AJ. I've gotten to interview your dad in the past, the United Franchise Group. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, the history of Signarama. If I remember correctly, I think it goes back to, it was around like 1986 and, maybe where the company is today.
Yeah, you're right on target. It started in 1986. It was one sign shop in Long Island, New York. My dad, he sold the signs, and a guy by the name of Jim Tatum made the signs. And as they say, after that, the rest is kind of history. So, they started in that and then built it, moved the company to South Florida, and just continued to grow the franchise over the years. And then United Franchise Group as a whole went from Signarama to adding, over 10 brands now in our franchising portfolio. So, it started humble beginnings. It always was supposed to be a franchise, so because my grandfather started Minute Man Press, my dad, he built the business to franchise, and that's different than probably most people getting into franchising. It started there.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about United Franchise Group, because as you mentioned, AJ, I guess there's about like 10 brands. I mean, what do you look for, or, what was your dad looking for when he started the United Franchise Group? Because there is some diverse brands under the umbrella, isn't there?
There are, and that's part of why we did what we did, is we want to diversify. Just like any good company, you want to diversify your investments, and that's what we're doing. But in the same breath, we were just Signarama for the better part of 2 decades. And, at the end of the day, we're not a sign company. We're a franchise company. We help our franchise owners sell signs and build their business. So our core competencies can be stretched over many different industries. So we look for good brands. We look for big industries, up-and-coming industries, where we can take our processes and our franchise expertise and build that industry and that brand and help grow that. And so we're in food, we're in the shared office space, we're in business brokerage, we're in promotional products and marketing, we're in sign and graphics, obviously. We've added a bunch of different home-based businesses or remote businesses as well. And so these are all different things. We look at diversity within our portfolio, but we also take our core competencies and say, okay, what can we do in different industries?
I want to congratulate you on the book, AJ. I think that's wonderful. The title of the book is called The List, Lessons Learned from a Father. And I don't want you to give the list away because I want, our listeners to, of course, read the book. But, maybe you could talk about, maybe, even if there's, one lesson you can share. I mean, there was a great story I remember reading, and I think it actually pertained to your grandfather. It had to do with something like a $5 bill. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that one because I have a feeling that one's in there.
Yeah, it is in there. And so the list was my motivation to write the list. So my dad, when he was traveling, he wrote down 18 things that he wanted to teach his children. And one of the two non-negotiable things when my dad was in town is he always drove us to school, and he always had dinner with us at the dinner table. That was non-negotiable. Wow. Okay, and he's a busy man, and he traveled a lot. But when he was home, he made sure that that time was his. And driving to school, he made us recite the list. We had to memorize it and recite it to him every day. And, when you're a kid, you think, man, this is boring. Why are we doing this? But then when you look back and you remember and you think of it, man, he was instilling core values in us when we were 10 years old, and that's all the way onward. And so, but my grandfather, JJ, that's my dad's father-in-law, my mom's dad. I started working for the company, and one of the lists is be on time. Lombardi time, you have to be 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early. And so my grandfather, I was running late to a meeting, and I didn't let him know. I didn't, reach out to him. And I show up, late, however long it was late. My grandfather looks at me, and he takes a $5 bill out of his wallet. He puts it on his desk, and he writes on the bill, literally with pen, respect for time. And then he ripped the $5 bill in half in front of me. He gave me half of it, and he said, when you respect someone's time, you can get the other half of the bill. Now get out of my office. So, and I'm in high school probably, or just out of high school, and I'm obviously I had two different emotions of, man, I upset the general manager of the company, but also I upset my grandfather too. So that's the stuff you have to deal with when you're in a family-run business. So, but in the same breath, it was a good lesson because I didn't respect his time. I didn't give him a heads up. I didn't care that I was late, and that's a problem. And so right.
And I understand you still have that $5 bill today, don't you, AJ?
I do. I have it actually in a little frame. It's in my home office.
Tough question, AJ. It's probably hard to narrow it down to one single thing. But, I mean, since you've become the president of Signarama and the United Franchise Group, I mean, what's one of the most interesting things that's happened to you since being president? Tough question, right?
That is a loaded question. It's interesting. I've really enjoyed, so from a personal standpoint, I've learned a ton from our franchise owners. A lot of these people I've grown up with, so we're in business 36 years, and so I've known them, and they've watched me grow up, and that's been interesting in a lot of ways. But I've learned a lot about business, how things operate, how people are. I've gotten to travel all over the world, and I've gotten an opportunity to hear different cultures and different people and how they do business and how they treat other people, and that's been a huge experience. That's been interesting for me. There's been tough times. There's been, sad stories, just like when we all deal with, and we all have our human experience, and that has taught me as well. But it's really the people. It's about the team here at the corporate office, the people who've been with us 20, 25, 30 years, the core Signarama team, our franchise owners, their employees. That's been what's fun for me. I'm a people guy. I'm not a numbers person. I'm a people person. Right. And so that's always been the most interesting thing. We have a ton of stories, and you can sit around and tell the quote-unquote war stories from, the many years, but, I'm looking at building, what's the next story, and how do we make memories now for the next war story. And so instead of reminiscing on the past, I want to do that. So
it's amazing how many countries you're also in as well, AJ. I mean, have there been a favorite? Do you have a favorite country that you've been to?
Well, I'm biased towards Australia. Okay. Australia, we have over 100 franchise owners in, and it's our second biggest country. And it really was, with my dad, the right place, right time. Where he went to Australia and was able to help build it, and now we're really well known in Australia. So that's been a lot of fun. I'm in Australia in a non-pandemic time, usually twice a year. So I get to go back this year, but that's probably Australia I would pick.
That's great. Yeah, that makes sense. How did you handle the pandemic, AJ? It seemed like it was a common theme, in doing the show such a long time, when COVID happened. I mean, it was hard to get through a show without talking about COVID, but how did you guys handle the experience?
Well, I mean, for Signarama, we're pretty lucky that, a lot of our products we sold during the pandemic, and we were considered in most places in the country and the world a required business. I'm losing the term right now. Yeah, and so we were able to do business with hospitals and restaurants, and our delivery business really big in terms of wrapping vehicles and things of that nature. I talked to a franchise owner recently, and he said, I knew that we would grow, but I didn't know the products that we were selling, like acrylic barriers and social distancing, decals and signage. And so we did really well. So I kind of feel guilty telling you that, because I know there's a lot of businesses that didn't do well. But overall, we're very blessed. And not every business at UFG did extremely well during the pandemic either. So, but Signarama did very well. Yeah.
That's wonderful. What's interesting about, when I think of Signarama, AJ, is some of your franchisees, I mean, have been with you, it's like 20, 30 years. I mean, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Oh, I think so. And I mean, they want to be around. I think it says a lot about the company, UFG and Signarama. I think it says a lot about the industry. I think it says a lot about the franchise owner, too, that, they want to keep at this and build the business for that long, where, nowadays people can't stick into a job for 2 years. So, not because they get let go, but because they want to do something different. They get kind of antsy feet. And so, yeah, I think it says a lot about a lot of different things, and we're very proud of it. We talk about it in our item 19, longevity.
Right.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it says a lot about a lot of things.
Technology has changed a lot, since 1986. I mean, how has technology had an impact on like Signarama today, AJ?
A drastic impact. Yeah. I mean, just think 36 years ago, there wasn't no full color digital printer. It didn't exist. Right. Like that's the signage industry was really a plotter. Vinyl transformed the industry. And then on top of that, there were still artisans in the business. People were still painting signs 36 years ago. Yeah, now it's not as much as a business, but everything from flatbed printing to, the digital printers now are just unbelievable. That can print texture and can print all these different things and the vibrant colors. It's unbelievable. On top of that, electric signs, LED message centers, everything in between. The technology is incredible. But what's been interesting is our core products have really stayed the same for 36 years. People still have a plotter in their shop. People still sell cut vinyl. I mean, it's just in a different way. But they've been adding all these products and the ways to make the products over the years. So, it's been cool to be a part of that industry that's grown and changed so much. But it's changed so much, but it really hasn't in a lot of ways. So it's been cool. Yeah.
What types of characteristics do you look for in your franchisees, AJ? I mean, what's most important to you if you were meeting with a prospective franchisee?
We don't really have a good quote-unquote profile of what a franchisee is, because we have we have a diverse group of franchise owners from their background perspective. But typically what we look for is someone who either really enjoys sales and marketing, someone from a C-level, or a management level, but that likes to go out, meet with people, shake hands. This is a really sales-based organization and a sales-based business. And so, and even if you don't have that background, the willingness to hire someone who is a sales-based person or a commitment to sales, even if you say, hey, I'm not that person, no problem. As long as you have that commitment to the sales and marketing side, you can be successful doing this.
And what's the training like today, AJ? It's been a while since I've had your dad on the show, but what's the training like at the UFG today?
So we've changed it a little bit since the pandemic. We used to do 2 full weeks in person in West Palm Beach, and then 2 weeks on location with setup and finishing training. We've added a week of virtual training, so that's the first part, and then that goes into a week of in-person in West Palm, and then we have 2 weeks at the franchise owner's location. And so those are things that, we've added or changed over the years, but it's pretty much similar to what it's been for a while, and that's been, we've enjoyed that piece, but we've gone a little bit more virtual and more. It's better for the franchise owner that they, 2 weeks out of their hometown or their business is already tough enough.
Right. That makes sense. When I have someone on the show like yourself, who was pretty much, again, born into franchising, AJ, a lot of our listeners, after all these years, we figured out that most of them are new to franchising, and I think what happens is, and again, you know this better than I do, is they get overwhelmed because there's so much out there today to choose from. I think they say something like, I've heard the numbers like there's 3,000 or 3,500 different systems in the United States alone. So it gets a little bit overwhelming. So the question is where do you begin? So, from everything you've learned from a young boy to today, what advice would you give to our listeners then in their quest to buy a franchise?
It's a great question. There are thousands of franchises. So, I would start with, again, this is kind of my background is, how long has that franchise been in business? What's their track record? What, do they have a track record of success? Do they have long tenured franchise owners? Because that tells you something. Of course that's, I'm talking about UFG and us, but in the same breath, that's a big deal. If you have someone who's been around for a long time, why did they stay around? Why didn't they sell their business? These are all questions that we should be asking, and they should be asking. Same breath with the franchisor. How long have they been around? Do they know support? Do they have a good support system? These are all those types of things. I also, this might be an old school thing, but I look at how someone follows up with me in the sales process on how they're going to support me. So, for instance, if someone calls you and wants you to buy a franchise, but they don't really follow up all that often. They play a little hard to get. That's probably going to translate into how they support you. If they're prompt, or if they're talking to you often, or they're asking you a lot of questions and they want you to go through the process, that probably translates into the rest of the business and how they treat their franchise owners from a support side. And you want someone who's going to be attentive and do that. So I think that's great advice, AJ. So I could ask you the last question, AJ. As the president, where do you see, if you can look into a crystal ball, whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road, where do you see UFG and Signarama in the future? Well, Signarama is our flagship, right? So Signarama has been around this long. We're building this company. We're not a privately traded, private equity or publicly traded company. So my motivation with Signarama and my dad's motivation with United Franchise Group is a little different. We're looking at building this for the next generation. I just had, as I said, I have my daughter who's 2 months old. I'm building this business for her down the road, and I have 2 brothers and 3 cousins who are younger than me and want to be in the business. And so I know this brand is going to way outlast me and way outlive me, and that's what we're building it for. Of course, there are brands within our portfolio that we will sell and move on from, and it just may not be the right fit, and we'll help the franchise owners find a better fit with another, franchise organization or whatnot. But, I see us continuing to add brands, continuing to grow UFG as a whole. And then I think for Signarama, there's a ton of different opportunity. I think our problem sometimes is that there's so much opportunity, we got to focus on a couple things. And so that's the big thing for me is how do I direct the team and how do I work with franchise owners to pick the most important things to grow in over the next couple of years. But electric signs, digital message centers is definitely something. I think maintenance and installation is another thing. I think maybe a subscription-based model are all things we've thrown around here at the corporate office. But we want to stay true to our core. We want to stay true to, we're a sign manufacturing business, and that's what we want to stay true to. So we make signs and we build and we help people in their business.
How do our listeners get hold of the book, AJ, the list, Lessons from a Father? I mean, can they get that on Amazon? Where's the best place to get the book?
Yep, it's on Amazon. So again, it's the list of Lessons from a Father, AJ Titus. My dad wrote the foreword as well, and it's a quick read. It's not a long read. I made the book cheap online. I think it's $10 online. But I want to write a book that everyone can sit down and read in a sitting or a couple sittings, and and if they pick out a couple lessons from it, that's awesome. That's what I want.
That's fantastic. And how can our listeners get more information on Signarama, AJ, or the United Franchise Group? Any websites that you'd like them to go to?
Oh, sure. You can go to UnitedFranchiseGroup.com to look at all of our brands. For Signarama directly, you want to do Signaramafranchise.com. That's our franchise development website, and there's also Signarama.com if you're looking for signs and graphics as well.
That's fantastic. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed speaking to you, AJ. And I'd love to invite you back over the next year or two, and see what you're doing. And again, it was a true privilege for me to speak to you today.
Anytime. I appreciate the time as well, and it's a lot of fun for me. And this is our passion. This is what we do. So
that's right.
Talk for a long time.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been my pleasure, AJ, and we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com. Or you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. We've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now, and during that time we've had some incredible quotes on the show. Today's great quote in franchising comes from Tom Scarda, and Tom is a franchise consultant for FranChoice, and he's the author of The Magic of Choosing Uncertainty. And we've had Tom on this show 2 times over the last 14 years, and Tom is great at providing analogies on topics like motivation and entrepreneurship. So today's great quote in franchising is called "It Doesn't Hurt Enough." We'll let Tom explain why.
10 years with FranChoice, helping them to find businesses. And what I find, and this from the industry, is that majority of people who look at franchising do not buy a franchise. And the number one reason is fear of the unknown. Yeah. So they go, instead of choosing, at the end of the process, they're looking at great companies because we vet them, we know who's good, who's not, and you can never deny that the companies are not good when you go down the road at looking at them.
Right.
The choice is not what franchise to buy. The choice is the choice between uncertainty and unhappiness.
That's interesting.
And most people go back to the unhappiness, and because there's a comfort in that, right? So at least I get a paycheck. At least I know I have a job. At least I can pay my bills. And I got to tell you, if you think you're on this earth to pay your bills, you're always going to have a mild kind of frustration that goes through your life.
It's very powerful. What you said, Tom. We've seen that on the show too. I've heard numbers like at like 1 out of 100 people will say yes to going the franchise alternative, or they'll give some kind of like excuse like well, it's not perfect. And I remember you even saying this a long time ago is there's not really that always that perfect opportunity. You know what I mean? There's always. I think the analogy you used a long time ago was even when you buy a house. You know what I mean? There's always going to be something with that house that you can always fix. You know what I mean? So there's never that
That's
perfect opportunity, and I suspect you get that from a lot of people because they're so terrified of going forward. There's like, well, I don't think this is the perfect opportunity for me. I suspect you probably get that a lot, don't you?
Yeah, and you're right. I think it was in Joe Matthews' great book, Street Smart Franchising.
Yeah.
He talks about that. 1 out of every 100 people that look at franchising actually buy a franchise, and that the thing for me, Marty, is it makes me sad inside because I talk to these folks that have great backgrounds. They're phenomenal at what they do, and they can easily translate their skills into their own business and really live happily ever after, and they don't. And it's always because of fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. You use a powerful word, Tom. You used happy. And I think it's interesting that how many people there are out there that are working day to day, and they're just as you said, they're paying their bills, but they're not happy, are they? And I know a lot of those people who are working for, let's say, the city, and they're going to get their pension at some point, but they just aren't happy. And I can't imagine working 40 years and not being happy. And you wonder, it's really that powerful, and that's why I think your book is so important. The magic of choosing uncertainty is that you lived it, haven't you? I mean, I'm sure you've been through all of those things that a lot of your clients certainly have going through their head, don't they?
Yeah, I've been in their shoes, and that's why I kind of enjoy I love what I do, because I'm really able to speak to people on a a one-to-one basis that I not only have empathy, I've been there, I've done it, and maybe it's not for everybody, and that's fine. I get that. Not everybody should buy a franchise, believe me.
Right.
But but when you're there and you're on the cusp, and it's the 11th hour and you have to make a decision, and you run away from it, it's really, really sad. And from my perspective, it is, and I think from their perspective, I just read an article last week that said 86% of Americans want to change their job today.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I think it was
86%.
86% of Americans want to change their job today, and probably maybe 1% will, get out of the corporate rat race. A lot of people will change jobs, and they're going from one fire to another fire, and they really don't solve anything. But I'll tell you that a great story that I share with everybody, and I think that it will go very, very well here. If you can imagine for a second, there's these two guys sitting on a porch, like two old hillbillies, right? And they're drinking their sarsaparilla, and they're rocking in their rocking chairs. And one of them has a hound dog, and the hound dog's sitting on the floor. And every once in a while, that hound dog lets out a yelp.
Yeah.
So one of these guys, one guy says to the other guy with the dog, "What's wrong with your dog?" And he said, "Nothing's wrong with the dog." So he said, "Well, why does he yelp like that?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, he's laying on a nail." And he said, "Well, why doesn't he get off the nail?" And he said, "Well, I guess it just doesn't hurt bad enough."
Wow. That's a great analogy. We're going to have to use it. We have this great quotes in franchising podcast. We're going to have to put that one in there. I haven't heard you tell that story, but I think that's I mean that's a great one. I mean, it does show how we're willing to live our lives like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It frustrates the heck out of me. And in the book, I give people what I call fuel for change, which are different exercises at the end of a couple of different chapters where you can go through changing your mindset about things.
Yeah.
And you realize after a while, all your stuff, all your baggage in that fear department essentially comes from your parents and from your upbringing telling you, no, don't do that, be careful, and if you lose, you're a loser. And that's not the case at all, because when you take a chance, and if it doesn't work out for some reason, there's more life lessons in that failure than there is in any success. And I can tell you that directly from my smoothie experience.
Sure.
There's so much more to learn when you're trying to climb out of a hole than standing on top of the hill.
Yeah, and it's, it must be interesting. I'm one of those people, as I mentioned, Tom. My mom is still waiting for me to go apply for the post office. I said I'm going to be 50 years old in 3 years. And I just recently, completed my doctorate degree last year, and I think she's still waiting for me to go work, for the post office. She just tried to instill that in me as a kid, and maybe that was my reason I went the other direction. It just didn't seem gratifying to me, not to pick on anyone who works for the post office, but I wouldn't have had that. And I love the word you use. You use this word fuel, and we had the great Michael Gerber on our show, and I know you're a fan of his as well.
If you'd like to hear that whole interview with Tom Scarta, all you have to do is go to franchiseinterviews.com. You can go to our franchises listed alphabetically page, and you can find Tom Scarta there. Or you can go to franchise interviews listed by category, and you can go to our franchise experts page and listen to the interview there. And finally, we just want to thank everyone for making this Great Quotes in Franchising podcast such a big hit. And we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising from Franchise Interviews. Take care, everyone.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.